Welcome to the Popcorn Innovation Podcast, a special pre-summit conversation created by Cat Squared and co-branded with Mavens of Manufacturing. I'm Megan Zimba, host of Mavens of Manufacturing, and I'm really excited to help bring a new layer of storytelling to this year's Popcorn, the Innovation Summit presented by Cat Squared, happening August 10th through 13th at Oak Lawn Racing Casino Resort in Hot Springs, Arkansas. For nearly 30 years, Cat Squared has worked with food manufacturers to bring greater clarity, control, and visibility to complex plant floor operations. This year's summit builds on that very foundation by looking at where the industry is headed next. We're setting the stage for the conversations that matter most across food manufacturing right now, including connected operations, predictive intelligence, traceability, AI, interoperability, cybersecurity, and the shift from operational complexity to operational clarity. Because the future of food manufacturing is not going to be built by more disconnected dashboards, more isolated systems, or more data nobody knows how to use. It will be built by people, partners, and technologies that connect the dots from farm to fork. Today, my guest is Greg Bodak, CTB's Vice President of Business Development. Greg spends a lot of time listening to processors, producers, and integrators, and today we're going to talk about what the market is asking for, where fragmentation is creating risk, and why connected data is becoming a strategic necessity across food manufacturing. Hi, Greg. Thank you so much for joining us for this special series of Popcorn, the Innovation Summit presented by Cat Squared. I'm super excited to meet you in person come August at the summit, but can you just introduce yourself real quick to our audience and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you're connected to the summit?
Great to see you again, Megan, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in August. I'm with CTB. CTB is a company for agriculture equipment, and Cat Square is one of our companies. We are part of the Berkshire family, so we are part of the huge U.S. corporation and all involved in agriculture. In my role in business development, I have really a dual role. One, I'm spearheading the initiative with Synergy with a C. This is really the initiative of trying to get the data out of all the equipment that we have from farms and processing places to the cloud and using analytical tools to provide value to our customers. So that's one portion of my role. And second one is dealing with mergers and acquisitions. So we're always on the lookout for great companies that can become part of our family going forward.
That has to be such a fun opportunity to just be able to look into different companies and see if they're a fit for your family. And then that's a different kind of shopping that I would probably have a time with.
And each business got different business models. We see anything from public companies traded on stock exchanges, and they disclose a lot of public information that they get on it. But also we look at many, founder-based companies. And those companies, sometimes, founders want to retire, they want to cash out, there may be no second generation to take over, and they tend to find home with us here in Berkshire. So always a fun discovery. It's never a boring day. You may be looking at fish or vegetables or fruits or some processing plant that you never really, so it's a great learning experience for us as well.
Well, you have such an interesting position because you're able to be on the front lines of actually what's happening in agriculture and food manufacturing. So what operational themes do you see surfacing on a repeated basis in your conversations with processors, producers, and even integrators within food manufacturing?
Yeah, so, when you really go back a while, our agriculture was very manual in the past. Most of people were involved in agriculture at one point way back. Then the automation came in, and the livestock now, a lot of it is fully automated, does not require a lot of physical or manual labor. It's still some, but it's nowhere near as much as we did in the past. And especially on the live side, the barns and the chicken houses are getting bigger, so density is getting bigger. The genetic makeup of livestock is getting better over time. We are seeing as the next step after the automation, that's going to be really data harvesting and understanding your data and use data for your decisions instead of gut feels. There's still a lot of, you talk to any farmer out there and they have a secret sauce, and there is some truth to it. They've been raising animals for a long time. But also we wanted to supplement that with actual data. Because, if you do X, Y, and Z, you're going to have a better result. Is it true or not? or there are some other variables. There's so many variables when you do livestock or processing of meat that sometimes it's hard to separate, noise to signal ratio can be a problem.
Mm-hmm. So with all of this growth and new technologies entering into the manufacturing industry, when processors come to you and talk about, frustration inside their operations, where does that frustration usually begin? Where does it happen first?
Mm-hmm. So we started the synergy initiatives, honestly, probably it's been a few years now. Mm-hmm. It's a process going through. We have some of our businesses already launched some digital products, but part of my job, I'm collecting the voice of customers. So really talking to processors, integrators, and farmers, and trying to assess their needs. And this is, it's the old adage is if you ask somebody, do you want a better candle, they're going to give you a better candle, not a light bulb. So there's some value in talking to customers. So you develop product, but also you have to provide our knowledge and our technology and see if you marry those two things together, can you solve their problems? When you talk to the processing operations, they raise all kinds of different things. So typically when I have discussions with them, we talk about generally, what are your problems? And you would hear market is a problem. We have the outbreak of AI, for example, in poultry. So we have the outbreak of disease. Suddenly you have to reschedule the plants. The birds availability is a problem. Feed cost is up, so your margins are tighter. If you're an integrator, integrators provide the feed for chickens. Market demand, it's evolving. Classic change we're seeing here in the US that still the white breast chicken meat is still the most popular and probably the most expensive. But people are moving a little bit into more of a dark meat, that debone thighs and drumsticks. So that requires changing your technology, changing your workflows in a factory. Labor is always a concern. Trying to get labor, some of those processing plants have still very high employment, people plus operations usually. So trying to get people and retain them over time, it seems to be a challenge. It is a challenging work environment. You always work in a cold, you operate in a meat. So you work in a refrigerator if you work, and also you're dealing with the slaughter of animals. So for some people, it takes toll on them as well. So it is a challenge. It's a heavily regulated industry. So we have DEA and all kinds of other agency, animal welfare, animal rights activists. You add it all up, but there's a lot of other things that you're dealing with. Climate change and ESG is a big one for them. How much water use per bird process or energy or disposal of the renderings and things like that. So that's typically how we start discussion. What's your challenge? All of it. Then we step back and, I always joke about it. It's yield. Yield is really the big metric for them. And the yield, many different processors measures it differently, but typically they take the live weight. So all the birds are coming into the processing plant. And what's the yield of meat that I had at the end of the line? So this is, I would call it the overall yield. Then you have yields of, how much chicken breast meat I get, what's the weight of drumsticks, what's the weight of wings, and all this other stuff. So the yield is really broken down into different, in a cut up section versus whole birds versus just all kinds of segmentation of that metric. But the yield is really ultimate measure of, can I be successful making money in this business? And also predictability of supply and demand. So I have so many orders from, let's say, stores or food service places. And I have so many birds coming to my processing plant, and the supply chain, we're trying to match it together, and it's a tough job, because you have a lot of variation even on the birds coming to your place. You may have a blizzard, you may have, the outbreak of disease, you may have traffic, you may have truck driver doesn't show up, truck breaks down. There's all kinds of things can happen. Typically, we are dealing with a perishable item, so meat doesn't last we're talking days from the time it's processed to the time it's really consumed. So we don't have a lot of time unless we obviously freeze it. But from a fresh meat perspective, it's literally hand to mouth as you operate in the shop. It's not metal parts that I can put in a warehouse and get to it, in a week or two.
You can't really have a high inventory.
And the processing, the hygiene of processing is very critical, because I can get, pretty good yield. But if I have contaminated meat because of the temperature, because of some bacteria or some hygiene issues that I had in the factory, all the yield is out the door, because you have to get rid of all of that meat that was discovered. So it takes a lot,
Yeah. Well, and I feel like they have to deal with recalls too. So like if they do find something that has happened to a batch, then you have to deal with the recalls and be able to trace that. That's a lot of information to manage. So I'm really
It's
excited to have
huge.
you.
And also it depends on, if you sell your own brand, it's an impact on your brand because you have recall of your branded product. It probably will
Yeah.
have impact on your volume. If you contract, you do private labels, so you process the chicken for somebody else. And if their brand is now effective, maybe their contract with you is impacted as well in pricing, and maybe they go somewhere else. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of things like that. And if you have multiple of offenses, you may have, place may get shut down at some point. It usually doesn't get to that point, but then you have to spend a lot more money on improving all the hygiene. You have to do some CapEx investments. Typically, the less human interaction we have in a processing plant, the less chance for spreading of things is. So automation is a big, big play in it. Like I mentioned to you in our prior conversation, we typically process the new processing plants, 30,000 birds an hour and up. So you're talking about a lot of birds going through that plant in one shift.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, with all of these new technologies that are coming into food manufacturing, how has that changed the expectations around visibility, traceability, interoperability, and performance? Like, what were the expectations prior to having advanced technologies, and how have those changed with the introduction of these newer technologies?
Even before and after, the joke that we have is that we ran on Microsoft Excel and we still run on Microsoft Excel. But we do have, everybody's got an ERP system, that's where we have pretty good software from manufacturing execution system standpoint that we can trace and manage the flow of product in the meat place. There are some disconnects. It depends how many sensors you have and which operations. Typically, processing plant depends on the layout, but you would have the primary processing, which takes the live bird to the carcass of the bird. The secondary processing, which typically it's a cut up, debone, or deskin, or something like that. And then you do further processing in some places that you may make chicken nuggets, you may make fillets, you may fry, you may bake, you may do all kinds of other things, and you may freeze the product. So that's what we would call further processing. A lot of the equipment is from different companies. It's not necessarily integrated in their system. So many times when you're a plant manager or supervisor, you may be getting one dashboard from one place, Excel spreadsheet from another place, ERP message from yet another place. And then you have relatively little information from the grower side, from a farm. Which farm they came from? Is that the farm that we had problems with in the past consistently? It's a chronic problem. Is that the different genetic of chicken that's on the processing, or different age? Farmers get paid based on weight, growers. There are certain rules about when you withdraw food, for example, before processing, because it's got a big impact. If they are too fat before you process it, they're going to be heavier. The second thing, when you remove the evisceration process, that potentially can create contamination, all kinds of other issues with it. So there's a very specific process, and did the grower follow it or not? The animal welfare inside of the chicken house got impact on processing. So there's just a lot of things that goes into it. And, on the other hand, all of us are consumers, right? So I can go on Amazon, order something for $3, and I'm getting minute by minute almost update of where's my product will show up here. It's on the way. It's 10 stops away. It was delivered. And I have a picture of it in front of my door, right?
Yeah.
Yet in some of those big processing operations, we don't have that. So ideally, we'd like to get to that stage that I have so much traceability that I can really understand, depends on the question of the data that I have. When the birds are stunned and I'm hanging them, are we hanging at a good rate or not? As how many empty shekels are going through the place? We typically have a rear view mirror, that I find out next day or end of a shift. How did I do? It's like watching a football game without a score. You find out the score the next day, and then you're trying to adjust. So that's part of the challenge, not having real-time data, whether it's from farms or from processing places.
So one thing that stood out in our pre-interview was you mentioned CTB is not trying to build digital products in a vacuum. You spend a lot of time with customers, and I think those moments with customers, I love talking to people. I think their voice really matters, especially in times where digital technology is so prevalent and there's a lot of pressure to update everything and invest in the latest and the greatest. Why is voice of customer input so important to you, especially when it comes to providing the right products for the customers that you serve?
So there are really two things. You're trying to take approach to product development of trying to implement something that customer actually use. Software development, as you know, is it's iterative process. You typically want to launch something, throw it out there, let people try it, come back, and you iterate. That's why we have, when you look at your phone, the apps will get constant updates, right? With either features or bug fixes or whatever it is. In our industry, we've been in equipment business for 50 years plus. So we've been in this industry for a very long time. And we've seen many companies jumping into data and trying to connect and trying to do all kinds of things with it. And usually those are companies that are relatively small. They're startups. They have one feature set of a product, and many of them fizzle away over time. Monetization in this space is critical. So at the end of the day, we can have all kinds of nice features on a product. Is the customer really willing to pay for it? So part of my conversation with them is usually, what are your pain points? So we have more general discussion, and we're trying to nail it down to how, if you had a magic wand, what would be this product that would be ideal for you, digital product? And then the last question is, how much would you be willing to pay for it? And usually it's like, well, not too much, sell it with equipment. But definitely, I think we see a shift, and people are open both on the live side and on the processing side to subscriptions. When you go back probably 10, 15 years, it was almost like a license agreement. You just buy license once and you get the annual support. That was the model. Just like we were buying music way back. You're probably too young for that, but with CDs but now we pretty much have a subscription. We pay once a month and we have access to pretty much all of the music. So I think the subscription model is more becoming popular in our industry as well. People are very conscious of the money. Many of those businesses are thin margin businesses. So you really have to provide the return on investment. You spend so much a month, a quarter, a year on the data. Are you going to get the return on that investment? And we believe they will, because we can give them literally almost a formula of how to improve your yield over time.
Yeah. And I remember the days back where I had to have a cassette tape and try to stop it at the right moment to record one song. So I remember those days.
I bought many CDs just for one song too,
Those home mixes were always fun to do. There is a lot of companies that when they go into a place, they have their demos, right? And customers, I think, assume that everything that's shown in the demo is exactly what they need, when that can be off a little bit. So when you're talking to customers, what are they telling you that they actually need versus what technology companies may assume they need? Like, where's the difference there?
So, there are a bunch of conversations, around the table and we have on it. Sometimes they are aware of different things, because we are all seeing, LinkedIn or promotional thing. AI is the big one right now, everywhere, right? But we joke around in our industry, AI stands for many things, avian influenza, it's artificial insemination, it's artificial intelligence. So we really have to be careful when you say AI, that's specific about what you mean by it. But I think some of the AI systems are still in its infancy in our business. People are very skeptical about sharing data, so it's very critical. Like, for example, if you go to processing plant and tell them, give me access to your data because I'm going to put my AI agent on it. Whoa, that kind of puts it in a quick stop. Which data, for how long, who owns it, just all kinds of discussions around data and security and things like that. So they really are looking for, can you give me something simple? And I think when I really think back about interviews that I've done, the common theme that I saw in this, that they're overwhelmed with data, but they feel like they don't have enough actionable information. We all have spreadsheets, we all have all kinds of reports, and they're not necessarily connected. I cannot make sense out of it, which is a perfect grounds for AI at some point, or artificial intelligence in this case, to jump on the data and provide you some insights. So even on a farm, when I talk to the growers, in many cases say, I don't need a dashboard. I mean, yeah, dashboards are good, but I don't want my guys to be on a computer too long. They're here to take care of the livestock. Give me something on the phone, send me a message when I have to take specific action. Or when I drive my truck and I have to stop in different chicken houses or barns, where should I stop today first? Which one is priority? And this is based on sensor data or what's that air quality or water or feed or whatever may be happening in each house. So I think evolution to this type of analytics, I think that's where it's going to go. I'm sure you've seen dashboards and you use dashboards before. My experience with dashboards is they're a good first step tool. It gives you kind of a warning signal. Everything's running or something's not running. But typically you don't get enough information to diagnose what the problem is. Water is off. So typically you have to almost have a second or third layer dashboard, and you almost never get that information that you want. So I see potential LLM and chat models that you're going to have on the phone, communicating, writing on your data and the farms and the processing places, and giving you quick answers, or send you warnings saying something's happening, something's not right. I think the root cause analysis would be a huge one for any issues that pops out on the dashboard.
It's interesting because I've had other conversations around the use of dashboards, and the keynote speaker from the summit, Dion, he and I also had a conversation. And one of the things that came up in our conversation was training, because there are workers who will ignore the new technology because they don't know how to use it, or it just interferes with what they actually want to get done when they want to get it done. I think it's important for leadership of certain companies to make sure that they have buy-in from their employees as well, and have that conversation of the why behind it, because you don't know if it's going to be a hindrance on them trying to figure it out when things go wrong. They don't want to spend that time trying to figure out the new technology when they have a major problem on the line going down. So
I see the dashboard definitely it's got its place. It's a very glance of saying, is my operation good or bad? What it is. It's a great communication tool to your employees, put it in their area so they understand, they have a feedback, what's happening in my process. But for the root cause analysis, improvements, strategic changes, and things like that, dashboard just will not cut it for you. You got to have much deeper understanding of your data. That's what I believe.
Through your experience, have you seen companies get anything wrong when they build technology first and then ask customer questions later? Do you have any experience with that?
Yes. I mean, they usually kind of monetize it, so you go to a customer and say, and it depends how they package it. They may have, I'm selling that as an annual subscription, and customer will tell you, no, I need to pay monthly and I have to pay by credit card, for example, and you're not set up for that, and suddenly you're back to square one. So some of it's iteration. This one is very tactical, you can fix. But if you set up your security system wrong, like for example, customer says that I don't want to have a cloud data, I want to be inside of my network. And suddenly that could be a major surgery to your digital product if you don't have that. So trying to understand and also segment your customers, because clearly, you talk to 5 customers, you're going to get 5 different opinions. So some of it is segmentation, maybe large processors have different needs. They're highly automated. Maybe medium processors have different needs. Maybe people that do a lot more further processing in their factory need different needs. If they have multiple brand of equipment that's not connected, maybe they have different needs. If it's an integrator that owns the birds versus don't own the bird, they may have. So it's really understanding their specific situation. And when you segment the customer, you may have still the data may be coming from the same place, but it's displayed and communicated differently.
Okay. With the feedback that you are getting from the customers that you're talking to, how are you using that to really refine the synergy, spelled with a C, strategy?
Yeah. So synergy, and again, to clarify, synergy is really a platform, and we actually have a trademark. But each of our business unit, they're really charged with developing their own digital products. So the best analogy I could use, synergy is almost like a Windows, and businesses will develop PowerPoint, Excel, Word, and things like that. So there's some basic functionality to synergy, but anything that rides on top of it. So we're trying to standardize the data in the cloud, how you get the data to the cloud, basic analytics on it that you may get out of it, the portal. But then you decide what digital product you want to do. You may want to sell, alerts only for the barns. That it's going to tell you it's something's off in the barn, ADT security. You may want to sell a product to vets in the area that they're going to be able to get all the information from the chicken barns before they go, so they don't come in and they just don't know what's happening. Just the grower called them that something's off with birds, So you can develop all kinds of digital product that specialize for specific customers.
So earlier in our conversation, you did mention that yield is one of the most important metrics for processors. Why is yield loss so difficult to diagnose?
because there are too many variables, and sometimes
Oh.
I think somebody told me as like, when we start talking this conversation is at the end, we just say it's just chicken, we don't know. So, variability in birds. I mean, think about it, every bird is different, and we try to put in a processing line that's the same. So you have different size, different gender. We try to keep them as close as possible from a size standpoint, but we're going to have two genders typically. And different genders are typically different sizes, even if they grow the same way. They may be on different diets. They may be different level of health. And the yield is, again, just to qualify the yield is not necessarily just the pound for pound. So pound of live bird versus pound of meat. It's also quality of meat, because if they're on a poor diet and the birds were not as healthy during the growth cycle, quality of meat's going to suffer. So you're going to have to either downgrade the meat or render the meat if it's not good. So there are so many different variables. Typically, chicken goes, like in the US, through the water chill process, which meat can pick up weight because it sits in a cold water. Then we have an air chill process in Europe typically, and then they may lose water during the process. If you would measure a weight of bird throughout the entire thing, you would see a lot of variability. Depends how long it sits before slaughter, depends how long it's transported, depends when the feed withdrawal happened on the bird. Depends how closely, when I was taking the meat off the bone, how closely I got all the meat off the bone or skin. So sharpness of knives, the shape of the bird, because knives are not adjusted for every single bird. Typically, they're just set up for the standard bird. That's why in some places use people still, because person can probably get the max amount of meat or in situations like that. So it's, and not all this data is available. Some of it is just, how do I get data on how somebody holds a knife and cuts the meat, So some of it, you just look at the end of the day, say, I received so much live weight, and this is how much meat went out the door. And I kind of know what happened, but not really.
That's so interesting. What changes when teams can compare live production, transportation, processing, and downstream data in one operational context?
Can you repeat the question? I'm trying to understand.
Yeah. So when teams have access to live data, so in terms of live production, transportation, processing, and then the downstream data in one operational context, so everything is together, all of those data silos can kind of converge together. What changes for the integrators?
You definitely can give feedback to the growers, so it's like based on the lot that you send to me, this is how it looked now versus past 5 times, because many times those are ongoing contracts. And you can say, hey, genetic was the same, feed was the same, everything was the same. Why is the difference? We can look at for, quality of, for example, of the housing itself. So typically birds walk on a floor. And then the floor is not taken care of, or it's too humid, too much ammonia, or too many other problems. They may get like little blisters on their paws. And we scan some of our equipment that we have, one of our companies in mind can scan for this. We have AI tools that we can size the color of the blister, the size of the blister, and we can give you a feedback of saying, hey, you got to adjust maybe something in your farm or in your house. We can give them feedback on, ideally there's specific time we pick up the birds, but ideally because things happen. So sometimes they hang on to birds longer or shorter. Depends on the schedules, depends on the processing planning as well. So you can accommodate for that. Because sometimes when you have to hang on to a birds longer, that impacts the meat quality and also impacts feed's conversion, because I keep feeding them, but I'm not gaining any more weight. So there are variations like that. Genetics is a big one. For example, when you sell chicken meat, as you probably know, when you go to a store, there's different price per pound for drumsticks, for wings, for chicken breast, and all of that. And for whole bird, for whole chicken. So you're trying to maximize a profit as a processor, right? So the bird weight may be good, as a total bird, but, the chicken breasts are small. So suddenly I'm not getting, weight in breast. Or there's some unique anatomy in that lot that I'm not able to extract as much chicken breast meat as you can. So there's a lot of different variables like that can go into equation. That would be a feedback to genetic companies, the type of feed that they use. If they have any outbreak of disease, because that could be another red flag.
Yeah.
So,
that's
stuff like that.
So interesting as a consumer of chicken to learn all these different things that affect how, from farm to fork, basically, and what can affect good quality meat versus non-quality meat. You painted an interesting picture of a consumer scanning a QR code on a package of chicken to see where it came from in a previous conversation that we had together and how it was raised and what happened throughout its life cycle. What does that kind of why does that kind of transparency matter? So
Yes.
why is it important? Because I would be afraid to do that as a food manufacturer, because you have so much credibility on the line if
Yes.
things don't match up with what you're
Yes.
promoting. So
This is no different. I think Amazon tried to put reviews on products, or any companies putting reviews on their service, right? And nobody wants to put bad comments, but then to take a bullet and say, hey, I got to stand behind what I do. But the whole concept here is, and again, we would not get involved in it from a marketing standpoint. This will be more just an idea product, probably for any marketing company that markets meat.
Okay.
But we believe there's definitely a trend here in US and also in Europe that many people say, I want to go to my local farmer, get eggs or get meat. I know Joe, and I know how Joe raises his chickens, and I know it's good, it tastes better, and you go through all of this, right? So the idea here is like, why can't we do it on large scale? Many of the meat that is produced in high volume, it's a very good quality meat. And there are different tiers of it. There's organic, there's pasture raised, there is different genetics, different animal welfare standards that you apply for it. As a consumer, you should have a choice, right? So today, we do that with the marketing labels, that we put, whether you buy eggs or poultry or anything like that, you can look at the label, and the label claims that it was organic feed and no antibiotics, for example. How do you know?
Right.
Just meat pack in a tray with a little label on it. That would give you more transparency. And also, I think that would give the growers maybe some unique value proposition. And for marketing companies, maybe they can have a different premium market for their products as well. That if I want to have a chicken from a Joe's farm down the road that happened to be processed in that large facility, I can still do that.
That's so cool. I'm from a small town in Wisconsin, and we have a store called Bushel and Peck, and it's basically owned by a couple of farmers. And all of their produce come from local farms within, I think, a 50 or 100-mile radius. And it definitely tastes different from other meat products that you can get in some of the bigger stores that are around our neighborhood. And, some people just would rather support local farmers than big corporate food manufacturers.
Yeah, and transparency, especially with the smartphones that we all have right now, we are almost used to it. So we did a lot of labeling for CPG, for consumer packaged products. But with the phone now and QR codes, we can get a lot done. And again, that's not something that we would take on, because we are really deeper in the supply chain on it. But we could potentially enable it with the data that we would have in our systems. So like I said, for quality of food, genetics, and all those other things. Also, you can look at, how old is this chicken? It says used by date, but when was it slaughtered? When was it raised? Especially frozen product, it tells you used by that day. I want to know when it was frozen in the first place.
Right.
How was it in the freezer? The things that I think some marketing brands could take advantage of, and you can probably start some new brands with that angle as well. It's one of the potential digital products. Growers can include coupons or other things. Hey, you bought my eggs, now try my meat, or the other way around, or my produce. And by the way, there is a discount, and there's the stores nearby that you can buy my stuff. Or there's a farm market here every week in that location. So there are different angles you can go with that.
And I think the importance for consumers too, on the consumer side of things, some individuals just have health things that they have to be aware of, and they need to know what they're consuming on a consistent basis. So having that traceability and visibility and transparency is really helpful for anyone who needs to be very mindful of the type of health issues that they have. So
QSRs, quick serve restaurants, they frankly have done a lot of work on the animal welfare side. That they were pushing some of the initiatives, that they say, hey, I need beef or chicken or anything else raised in a specific way in order for you to do business with me. And they use that in the marketing campaigns as well. Now we can provide data to support it. I think at some point we're even looking at blockchain technology, but it's probably overkill. But at least we can have a basic transparency of trace of feed, genetics, animal welfare, and the logistics and the processing of it. And you can decide what to share with customers. But we can say what was processed or when it got in the warehouse, whatever you want, you can decide what to share, what would resonate with consumer.
So are there any steps that you're taking as a company? Because with AI, artificial intelligence, being so prevalent now, you hear the stories of people creating different types of videos that don't have real people in them. And I just came across music that was not done by an actual musician, but it was all created by AI. So with misinformation being easier to create, how do you create that trusted operational data to help companies protect not only their credibility with their customers, but also regulations and other information for their consumers?
Having data linked to the cloud, that it's transparent with date codes and stamps and things like that. That's some credibility. Our issue with fakes right now, and it's actually a bunch of articles recently. You probably maybe heard in the past that some video show up on a YouTube or somewhere that somebody's mistreating animal in a farm. People will break into farms and try to just catch you doing wrong things. It happens, one in a great while. I tell you, I've been in so many places, and 99.99999%. You want to have a stress-free livestock, because when it's got good water, good feed, good air, grows well, and you make money on it. So purely from, even forget the welfare standpoint, from a profit standpoint, you want to have a good, healthy animal that grows well. But, occasionally you catch it. But right now we're seeing that people make fake video about it. Somebody mistreating a cow or a pig or a chicken. And trying to separate is going to be a challenge for all of us. I don't know if we ever solved that problem. I think right now we almost have to assume anything you see on video or pictures of boys, assume that it's fake unless proven otherwise. I don't know how many times I was on LinkedIn or Facebook and I read something. No, I got to go and check it if it's really true. Can I get it from another source? Because that looks a little fake. But we live in a world that some of the real news sounds like fake news, but it's real, So, UFC fight in the White House, if I was traveling, I would see it on my feed without knowing it. It's like, no, this is not possible. And it happened.
Yeah, that was possible. I don't know if that was the right choice to have that there,
but it's like, it would be unthinkable. Like when you look at it, it's like, wait a minute, that just doesn't all add up here.
Yeah, that's a good point. You talked about having data in the cloud, and I know on the industrial side of things of manufacturing, especially any companies creating or producing or designing components for aerospace and defense, there's this new standard out called the C2 standard for companies that want to build or create components for aerospace and defense. And if they don't have this new standard, they're going to lose a lot of their business. And I know that doesn't necessarily apply to food manufacturing, but there's still this concern about, okay, who has access to our data? Who can share the data? What data do they have access to? So as farms and facilities become more connected, where are customers most concerned about cybersecurity, or is it even a concern in food manufacturing?
Yeah, so first, we are a heavily regulated industry. Regulations that we have on, to have a chicken barn, you need permits, or pig barn or anything like that. You have to have manure disposal. You have to be zoned properly. There's just a lot of regulation goes from livestock production, and a lot of regulations go on, including USDA and we inspect every single animal. And if it's not, anything is off with it, we have to render an entire bird, for example. So we are heavily regulated in that way. From security and cyber standpoint, you have many companies historically try to keep data inside of their networks. Some of it was purely that I have to have access very quick, so I cannot rely on the internet. If I'm running a machine and I have to need decisions in milliseconds or seconds, going to internet back and forth is not a good way to do it. Some of it's purely tactical operations. The other one is that you really try to keep everything on site, so its access to it is more restricted than a cloud. But with the cloud initiatives, for example, our ERP for CTB, it's Oracle Cloud, so all of our data is not on premise here. And there are some benefits to it. Any physical, let's say tornado comes to our place, destroy physically our hard drives, and we have hope for the backup and go from somewhere else. Versus when you operate from the cloud, doesn't impact you. because you already have automatic backups in different data centers and things like that. Data out. So for example, data when I take and I want to do dashboards or some analytics out of it, it's critical, but it's not as critical. I can take control of the processing place of the farm. So for example, if I can hack into, if I have an app on a phone that I can change ventilation in my barn, somebody from outside can hack into it and adjust the air. So for example, turn off the fans. Birds can die within literally minutes. It depends on the condition of your barn, but it can be a very significant event. Birds can go time without feed, without water, just like humans. But imagine if suddenly you have no air and you have all the ammonia and all the bad gases. It's a matter of minutes or short hours, let's put it that way, before you have a problem. So hacking into stuff like that, that's where everybody's worrying about. We had incidents like that. We don't know there was a hack or somebody physical access to the barn. Those barns are unattended. They are locked and secure, but they're unattended. If you get to control it, you can turn stuff off, because our controls measures, for example, how much air is in the barn, quality of air, and based on that, adjust the fans. The fans may run harder when it's hot and a little slower when it's colder, or the quality of air is ammonia level typically, or side of the barn. So there are some very critical elements of that system. Biosecurity breach is a big one. We had avian influenza outbreak. If you go to many places, either you won't be able to get in because they don't let you. And like on the pig barns, you have to shower in, shower out, literally change all your clothes before you can get into the barn, trying to prevent spread of disease. You have full hygiene in the processing plants when you go in, constantly changing your tops, changing gloves, changing all kinds of things as you go through a meat processing plant. So cybersecurity is a big one, but also there's more acceptance with the cloud, especially with dealing with the reputable, large data cloud companies. Amazon Web Services, you have Microsoft with Azure. A lot of people are on the cloud right now, especially with AI. But scary part is with the new model that Anthropic put out there, the new model is discovering a lot of abilities from a hacking standpoint and in the clouds. It's going to be interesting to watch over the next months of how that develops.
It's definitely an interesting time. I've heard from a couple companies who specialize in cybersecurity. Some of the states here in the United States have already had attacks on the watering systems for communities, and they had to go in right away. So your mention of the alert systems makes sense, because if something does go wrong, they'll at least have that heads up initially right away so that they can start working on it and find a solution to the problem. And it's just kind of interesting to see. And I'm a fan of those types of movies about hackers and stuff. So I'm like, ooh, what's going to happen?
Lately, they get pretty sophisticated. I heard in a bunch of cases that the prices are more reasonable now. So you kind of, companies sometimes saying, maybe I should pay and get a code. I think somebody told me that there was like a hacker review board that you can actually get how much integrity that crook has. Did they give you the code when you pay them with crypto or not? So we'll see how this thing evolves and develops. It's a cat and mouse game. Our systems are improving defenses, and hacker tools are getting better too.
Yeah. So how should the industry then approach data ownership, access, privacy, and trust? Do you guys have like a checklist of considerations with some of the companies that you're talking about in terms of?
Absolutely. So this is, we have standard user agreement just like everybody else, but probably you've seen it on the phone. You keep scrolling and you give up and you say, I accept, and you move on, but typically, most people want to have privacy on their data. But for transformed data, there is a co-ownership of it typically. And depends how transformed the data is. And also, do I take each point of average? Do I geotag the location or not? Or if I say, the performance in this county is X or in this city is X, can I anonymize it, that it's anonymous from that standpoint? So there's just a lot of elements will go into it. Also the access, who's got access to what level of data, So let's say you're a technician on a farm. You have a certain level of access. Maybe the farm manager's got a certain level of access. Then you may have an owner or integrator that's got different level of access. So there will be a lot of, security permissions of which data you're able to get and which one you cannot. How much data you keep, for how long, how much history you have on it. I just got back from Europe too. And in Europe, there is, I think, the new initiatives on the data that when you sell equipment, it's got any data producing hardware on it, that you legally cannot charge for it, and you owe it to a customer to have access to it. So Nobody yet knows exactly how it's going to work. It's Europe, so they are on the leading edge of some of that stuff. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. It varies, but
Mhm.
that's going to be interesting to watch. How that evolves and develop from a data perspective and privacy.
Yeah. So I have a lot of content on my computer because I'm a content creator. So I have a lot of photos and videos. And I was talking to some of my friends about, okay, how long do we keep this on our hard drive? When can we get rid of it? And I just remember, like, I used to file everything via paper and I would keep things for like 7 years before I was like, I don't think I need to keep it that long. Like, I think I can
Well,
get
the
rid of
good
some of
thing
these
is,
old.
yes, the storage right now, electronic storage in the cloud is getting reasonably, not expensive, but it still costs money. And especially on the data I do never touch. So there's going to be some probably purging of nobody's seen that data for 7 years. Do we really need it? We also have this, we can collect data, for example, every minute, every 5 minutes, every 15 minutes, and maybe we keep it for a month. And we
Mhm.
truncate the data. We keep only average for an hour, and this way the files get smaller. I know some people that when they take camera pictures, especially for AI, the bird, when you take the picture of the bird or egg or something like that you only
Mhm.
keep the exceptions, so if you found a fault with the egg or bird, you keep that picture and you keep maybe less, 800 or 1,000 pictures and everything
Oh,
else is discarded. Otherwise, we just generate so much, we probably would drown in it.
right.
But also on the other hand, from a personal perspective, I assume that anything on the internet that I put up,
Mhm.
I don't care that they tell me that they keep it private. With AI models, I mean, some of the stuff, even when you ask the latest models, it's clear to me working with it that they are using some super data.
Absolutely. Well, Greg, you're going to be speaking at the summit this year. So, can you give us kind of an overview of what your talk is going to be about? And then, what do you hope attendees from your session will take away from your conversation?
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to meeting everybody. That's first of all, it's a great networking session, I think. So everybody that comes, I assume we're going to publish the attendance before, so you can quickly look at the people that you want to meet, maybe based on their.
Mhm.
I would definitely recommend that you go and maybe on LinkedIn and check their background and where they are from and things like that. Maybe a little more in depth, maybe even connect before at that time for a little coffee and discussion, and maybe during breaks or an evening, because we can learn from each other. Everybody, from my voice of customer studies, I tell you, I never went to a new place that, I knew everything and I walked out with no new information. So, and especially with AI tools and analytics and data changing so fast that whatever I probably heard in Viv, in Netherlands a couple of weeks ago, it's still
Mhm.
evolving, and it's still maybe changing and people looking at it from a different angle and different applications. We're going to
Mhm.
have like people from several countries. So look out for different practices, especially in meat productions. Different countries have different regulations and different approach and how they do it. From my presentation, I just want to share with everybody what I'm hearing. Processors. I'm going to share what we see working, what is not working, what are the opportunities, maybe offer some ideas for roundtables, discussions, and maybe potential solutions. And also, I'm going to talk a little bit about history of how we got here. Because when you go back, let's say go back 100 years, how did we eat meat then and how do we do now and how this thing evolved and where do we think this thing's going to go? Because this is still, it's never ending process. I was just looking at eggs when I was in Viv, and I think right now hen versus like I want to say 30 or 40 years ago, hen produces twice as many eggs. I mean, just think about that. So genetics have changed, human preferences have changed for meat, and that all evolves. Same thing with feed. Feed and additives to feed are all different right now. The growth
Mhm.
cycles are changing as well. So it's a lot to process, a lot to learn. And especially, I think if you have a background in processing, maybe talk to somebody that's got a background in live production and vice versa, because that's where you really pick up probably a lot of new information.
That's so interesting. I'm super excited. One of the things that my kids did in school this year was they adopted a cow and then they were able to go meet the cow, but they also had eggs in their classroom and they were able to see the chicks hatch in their classroom. And I'm like, that's the coolest thing ever. But one of the things you did mention about attendees, maybe doing some research before the actual summit, there is an app that I do want to mention called Brella. So when you go onto Cat Squared's website to register for the summit, you'll be prompted to download the app, and there you'll be able to see the full agenda. You'll be able to know who the speakers are, and then you'll also be able to connect and network right before the event. Make sure you do that and introduce yourself, because it's always better to know at least one person before you go to an event if you're new. Greg, is there anything else that you want to conclude on? Any other point you want to drive home before I let you go?
Well, if attendees are anybody who wants to gamble, there's a chance in the casino. So I hope you guys win.
That's awesome.
It's a fun venue that we have, and I think we're trying to keep it relaxed. It's more about sharing of experiences, trying to understand where it's going. And I think the lineup of speakers is really good. I mean, I just saw in the final list now, speakers, and I'm looking forward to every single day. I'm going to talk about AI, analytics, and publish people and industry people, and on both sides. I think it's going to be a really great event, and we are looking forward to it.
Well, and with your platform synergy spelled with a C and not an S, I think that really drives home the point of the whole summit, is to really get from operational complexity to operational clarity. So I'm super excited to learn more about the poultry industry, because I'm more on the industrial side of things with raw materials and metal. And this is the first time I've been able to get really deep into food manufacturing. And it's been super exciting and such a fun learning experience. So I can't wait to get it.
If you ever have a chance, I highly recommend if you can get access to either chicken house, like, a commercial chicken operation, or processing plant, because when you witness it, you may come up with everybody comes in with a, different look of it. Again, it's a food that we eat almost every day. Almost everybody eats chicken. It's almost agnostic from a religion standpoint, not like pork or beef. Chicken is popular. It's one of the most popular meats in the world. And it's good to know how it's produced, because we got removed from it. In the past, many of us grown our own food, and now we just go to a store and get a piece of meat, and it's the livestock that turns into meat. So you got to really understand where it comes from, how it's processed.
That's a great point. Well, Greg, thank you so much. I can't wait to meet you in person at the summit. And again, to anyone tuning in, be sure to click on the QR code that I'm going to share later on in a few minutes, and be sure to register and get signed up for the Umbrella app. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Thanks, Megan.
That wraps up today's conversation in the Popcorn Innovation Podcast series, brought to you by Cat Squared and co-branded with Mavens of Manufacturing. The bigger story here is not just technology. It is how food manufacturers, processors, producers, partners, and operational leaders are working together to connect the dots across the full farm-to-fork lifecycle. Because when data stays disconnected, decisions stay disconnected. And when decisions remain disconnected, operations pay the price in planning, yield, responsiveness, traceability, labor, margin, and trust. This year's summit is designed to bring these conversations into the same room, enabling the industry to move from operational complexity to operational clarity. To register for the event, scan the QR code in the corner.